Rania, it's so great to see you, and I know a lot of parents are in this boat right now. What happens when the parent has to go back to work, but the child is not going to school? Where do we start?
Oh my gosh. Well, it's such a complicated issue. And I'll tell you first and foremost, I'm dealing with it as an employer, but I'm also dealing with it as a parent. We're just calling people to have very honest conversations. First of all, employees are nervous. They themselves are nervous to just all of a sudden pick up and go back to work. But beyond that, if you have kids, summer activity is not, we're not really officially in summer yet. You know, they're supposed to be at school doing their school work all day. You can't bring them to work, and it's scary to leave them home. So there's a lot of really important conversations you need to be having with a multitude of people, starting, I think, with your employer.
Well, I think too, Rania, when you're starting this and you are going back to work, of course, we have this gap, right, of school time, if there's even going to be some of these summer camps. And if you're looking to bring somebody in, whether that be a nanny or a babysitter, a daycare facility, we got to go back to the basics, and we've got to start asking those questions. We have to really make sure you're doing your homework.
Yes. I mean, it's such an interesting time. So yes, you have to vet your nanny, the daycare, and, ask all those important questions that you normally would ask. But now you've got to add like health questions. How many people are in your home? What other people are you exposed to? How are you tested? Are you going to be testing a nanny every morning when they walk in your door? It's really, really complicated. And then we know that a lot of people are exposed to the virus and don't even show. There are no symptoms. So it's a lot for a parent to take on. It's a lot for kids to take on. It's just one of those issues we have to navigate together. I've made a decision that if you are able to work virtually and it's not affecting your workload at all, then maybe you stay virtual until we map this out, until we get to a solution that's good for all. Because I would hate for an employee to come back to the office just to be sitting there worried about their kids, uncomfortable themselves or anxious. It may not be the best solution right now. So talk to your employer about, is that an option? You certainly don't want to be bringing your kids to work because that's exposing them to a lot more. And if you're in a position where it's not easy for them to stay home, it's a whole other set of issues. So really, it's a lot to think about.
Rania, what about children who potentially could be old enough, mature enough to stay home? You mentioned earlier that idea for a lot of parents is quite scary. So how do you know when a child is ready to be home alone, and what sort of plans should be in place?
So every parent's going to tell you, you could have 2 kids, 3 kids, it doesn't matter. They are so different. Their personalities are just like night and day, even though they're raised by the same parents, they live in the same house. So it's going to be based on the maturity of your children. Usually think of the oldest child and usually take into consideration the youngest child. Think of the neighborhood you live in, what you're expecting from your child while they're home alone. Are they mature enough to pull out food and make food? Are they allowed to use the stove? What types of medications do you have at the home? Is there a gun perhaps at the home? Do you have a pool? Will they be allowed to play outside? What happens if a friend rings the doorbell? Do you have a type of job where they can call you easily if there's a problem? Do they know who else they can call? So it's a lot of the normal things you would think of. But what makes it so unique is not only do you have to make sure that your family has an emergency plan, some people are forced to leave younger kids at home. We may not have left a child at this age home alone, but there is no daycare to send them to. There's no summer camp to send them to. So it's creating such a unique situation for all of us. And it's really one that you have to talk through with your kids. I always say, if you feel like your child's not old enough to handle the conversation in a serious manner, they're probably not old enough to stay home alone. It's one you have to talk about with your partner. There's just a lot of your neighbor, a good neighbor that's there nearby. Many, many things to take into consideration.
It really is part of the conversation. It's so interesting how this is now changing with the times. And I think part of that is when we're distressed and we're going through something that we've just gone through or going through this pandemic, we think about our mental health as parents, as partners, as adults. But we need to have that question because our children have the same concerns as well.
I mean, I don't know one person who hasn't been affected by what's going on. I mean, whether it's just fear of the unknown, the markets, you've been sick, you know, somebody that's been sick, maybe a close loved one has lost their life. I mean, it is just unbelievable what we're going through. And then there's the physical reality of being, you know, not stuck at home, but safe at home. And that creates a lot of emotional anxiety for a lot of people. Add to that, all right, now we can go out, but everybody looks so different. You have everybody wearing masks. The familiarity is not there anymore. You don't want to touch, you don't want to get too close to the person at the grocery store. You just want to keep away from the person walking across the street. There's so much. It's so jam-packed with emotions. Now add that to a child's plate. You know, they just want to run around and all of a sudden they're wearing a mask. People don't look familiar to them. We went out for the first time last weekend and just to a nursery. My husband's on this planting mission. He's planting all these trees in our yard. And I noticed my youngest was kind of looking around at all the people in the mask. So I didn't want to say, you know, make it about COVID. Oh God, they could be sick. You know, we don't want to get sick. I just turned it around and said, look, I think it's so wonderful that everybody cares. We all care about each other. And we're taking these necessary steps to keep ourselves safe and to keep each other safe. I turned it around into something positive to try to remove any of the fear and then open up the door for a conversation, because our kids notice more than we think. And unfortunately, they tend to draw their own conclusions. And it's best if we kind of intervene and talk to them. And I know it's harder for some kids at older ages to really be talkative, but it's important that we bring up the conversation. We ask them about it. We ask questions and we include them in what the family plan is. What are we going to wear when we go out? Are we going out? Why are we staying home? Let them be part of it, because I think that helps give them power and control and a sense of peace and ease.
And Rania, final thoughts. We are over time. If the kids are staying at home, you suggest you got to have a plan in place so they can continue that online learning.
Absolutely, which would include cyber safety rules. You know, how do your kids navigate online? What websites are they allowed to go on or not go on? What are the rules if they get an inappropriate message? Do they know what to do with all of it? Really, really important conversations that absolutely have to be had.
Rania Mankarious, always a great conversation. Crime Stoppers Houston, great to see you. And also, you can see more of this on the Scene on Houston Life section of our website.
Thanks, Rania.
Thank you,
Stay safe.
guys.
Say hi to your family for us.